The Fight Show on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is brought to you by Underdog. Underdog's got a brand new offer for new customers. Play just $5 and get $50 in bonus funds when you sign up with the promo code SGPN.
Every once in a while, the impossible becomes improbable. The birth of a new legend.
King Canelo!
They don't come around every day.
Omaha, Nebraska, stand
They take time, find their place. One step, then another. The punch leads to purpose.
Fighting out of Omaha, Terrence.
And when purpose consumes everything else, that hunger becomes fate. Now what was once improbable becomes inevitable. Two legends from different corners of the world both share the same story. But only one will walk away remembered.
The undisputed super-middleweight champion of the world.
That every once in a while now becomes once in a lifetime.
You are listening to The Fight Show here on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, where we will be breaking down the fight of the year. It's finally here. Terrence Bud Crawford is going to step into the ring with Saul Canelo Alvarez. This goes down tomorrow night in Las Vegas at the Allegiant Stadium. And I'll be breaking it all down for you here on this episode of The Fight Show on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. You can follow the Sports Gambling Podcast Network on X at the SGP Network. That's at the SGP Network. You can also follow me on X. I am the host of the Soccer Gambling Podcast, and the X account is at SGP Soccer. That's at SGP Soccer. Don't forget, we've currently got 25% off everything in the merch store when you use the promo code football. So be sure to check it out to make sure you never miss any of the free picks or any of the free pods from anyone here at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. And we do cover other sports, not just the NFL and college football. All sports are covered. And you can make sure you don't miss any of those by downloading the SGPN app. It really is the easiest and most convenient way to never miss any of our free picks or any of our free pods. Now, if you're looking for free additional picks and pods from me, I am doing a plethora of content at the moment. So we have the Lock Betting YouTube channel and the Lock Betting podcast. If you want to get the Lock Betting podcast, it's free wherever you get your podcast. That is where me and my colleague Cav are covering the NFL this season. We collectively have never had a losing NFL season. We are 11-0 for winning seasons. And you can get our NFL show on the Lock Betting podcast for free, along with my weekly Bundesliga show as well. And over on the Lock Betting YouTube, every single week I am doing an opening line report for the EPL, an opening line report for the NFL. I'm also posting additional content there as well, such as free plays. We've also just posted 32 team previews for every team in the NFL. So that's a ton of free content that you can get simply by searching for Lock Betting on YouTube or searching for Lock Betting wherever you get your podcasts. But, of course, if you want to get all of my official plays that go towards my tracked, transparent spreadsheets, head over to lockbetting.com. There you'll find the historical spreadsheets. Where you sign up is where you'll find the older spreadsheets, and the newer ones are on the Instagram. That is a hub for everything we do. On the Instagram, you will find free plays. You'll find betting information videos. It's a place to contact me if you have any questions. But most importantly, you'll find the latest spreadsheets with the latest 3 spreadsheets pinned to the top of the page. These spreadsheets accumulate to 147 months in a row of transparent and tracked profit. What that means is this service that I provide has been undefeated in sports betting, in sports gambling, for over 12 years without a single losing month. And it's a fact. It's a transparent and tracked fact. These spreadsheets go through an adjudicator and they are verified by existing members who have benefited from 147 months in a row of transparent and tracked profit. And you can sign up for the service now by simply heading over to lockbetting.com. But before you do that, I encourage you, do your research, do your due diligence, have a look through these spreadsheets because they will tell you many things, the type of bets we do, the sports we bet on, and most importantly, how we manage a bankroll. Because not only have we made a profit every month for over 12 years, we've done it with sensible bankroll management, which means you can get involved without a massive bankroll because this is a sensible service, not a monopoly money service that genuinely does deliver a real profit for real people on a monthly basis.
For the past decade, Terence Crawford has been at or near the top of pound-for-pound lists. Now he makes his case for where he belongs all time. Already a belt holder in 4 weight classes and the legitimate champion of 3, he is now leaping yet 2 more divisions, this time in a single bound, from 154 to fight the undisputed king of 168 pounds, Canelo Alvarez. No catch weight, no rehydration clause, no excuses. In boxing's long history, who has succeeded at what Crawford is about to attempt? Moving up this much in weight to fight the man in that division. 122 years ago, middleweight champ Bob Fitzsimmons beat Jim Corbett for the heavyweight crown, but it wasn't his first fight in the division like it will be for Crawford. Up on the cards against Joey Maxim, Sugar Ray Robinson himself collapsed in the summer heat chasing light heavyweight glory. And Maxim was a very good fighter, but he was no Canelo Alvarez. Light heavyweight champ Michael Spinks took the crown from a 220-pound Larry Holmes, who was an all-time great, but was never considered the best pound-for-pound fighter in the world, as Canelo has been for a good portion of his career.
Canelo remains king.
Sugar Ray Leonard pulled off an incredible upset of Marvelous Marvin Hagler, but Hagler had to make concessions to get the fight. 12 rounds instead of 15, a larger ring, bigger gloves. Canelo has conceded nothing to Crawford. Roy Jones Jr. took a heavyweight belt from John Ruiz, but no one thought Ruiz, and not Lennox freaking Lewis, was the champ. Even Manny Pacquiao, who beat up Oscar De La Hoya, didn't attempt something quite like this. Oscar wasn't the 147-pound champ at the time, had been campaigning above welter for years, and had to melt down the weight to take on the former 112-pound king for what turned out to be Oscar's career-ending fight. Arguello, Hearns, Duran, Whitaker, Chavez, Floyd. None of them ever rose this high in weight to beat a real champion this big. If Crawford succeeds, he'll have done what has never been done before in a sport that stretches back to the 1800s. If he succeeds against the odds, what will we say about Terence Crawford then?
So Crawford is stepping up, way up, to achieve this massive historical achievement. And whilst it still will be considered an upset, I no longer feel that it will be considered the level of upset that it probably would have been considered to be a few months ago. When I first went on to VSiN to talk about this fight during the summer, when there was no soccer and we were filling in by coming up with other things to talk about, this was one of the things that I had to do a show on. And I was picking Terence Crawford then when he was around about a plus 200 underdog. When this opened up, Canelo Alvarez was as short as 1-3 minus 300. And while it's very likely that the average man on the street is still very much picking Canelo, and therefore, if that's what the man on the street thinks, this is still and should still be considered a major upset. That's not exactly what's going on with the betting odds, because Crawford's odds have reduced significantly now as we approach fight night. Canelo has come in from 1-3 minus 300 to 1-2 minus 200. In fact, I have seen Canelo Alvarez as short as 4-6 minus, or as big, as 4-6 minus 150 this week. Terence Crawford, I've seen him as short as 6-4 plus 150. And the biggest price now available on Bud Crawford is 17-10 plus 170. That is a significant drop off from the 2-1 that was available at one point, or even the 5-2 plus 250 that was available at some books if you shopped around. And Canelo, as I said, was 1-3 minus 300. So it does seem to be moving towards Bud Crawford, even though most of the public bets are on Canelo Alvarez. But it's the sharp bettors that are betting on Terence Crawford to somehow find a way to win this fight, to move up the weight classes. I don't know if it's down to the fact they've not been impressed by Canelo's recent performances. I don't know if it's a case of Bud Crawford being undefeated and stepping up to every single test and doing it relatively impressively, especially when you look back to what was previously considered a pound-for-pound fight where the winner of Errol Spence and Terence Crawford would be crowned as the undisputed pound-for-pound king. Now, I feel like Crawford was a victim of his own success there because he won so convincingly. The narrative changed and many people felt like they made a mistake and that they overrated Errol Spence. You didn't overrate Errol Spence. Errol Spence was a world-class fighter who deserved to be in a pound-for-pound conversation. He's not average, but he was made to look average by Terence Crawford because that's how good Terence Crawford was on the night, and that's how good Terence Crawford has been up to this point in his career. He may be the older man coming into this fight, but all the miles are on Canelo, who has boxed significantly more than Terence Bud Crawford. So I would ignore the ages here. The ring miles are certainly on Canelo Alvarez, and with all that factored in, I think Bud Crawford has a phenomenal chance of creating history tomorrow night. And I have been on Bud Crawford since he was available at somewhere between plus 200 and plus 250. And I'm certainly not going to change my mind now that I've been joined by a lot of the sharp bettors who are coming onto the Terence Crawford train. So we are going to break down the markets here, and then I'm going to analyze how I think the fight will play out. I will also talk about a couple of factors that may influence how this fight plays out, especially if it comes down to the scorecards. And we're going to get into all of that. But before we do that, let me quickly let you guys know that we're brought to you by MyBookie.ag. MyBookie is your place to bet on football and everything else as well, including this fight tomorrow night. So be sure to head over to MyBookie.ag. Use the promo code SGPN for your 100% bet back bonus up to $500 for new customers. That's MyBookie.ag and the promo code SGPN. We're also brought to you by Rhythm, and Rhythm right now have introduced a leaderboard for weekly cash prizes just for tracking your bets in their app. Track 5 bets of the same type from any model, and you could any model you build, and you could win up to $1,000. So head over to sportsgamblingpodcast.com/rhythm. That's sportsgamblingpodcast.com/RITHMM Rhythm. Let me also utilize this pause to tell you guys about Underdog Fantasy. They've currently got a brand new offer for new customers where you just need to play $5 and you'll get yourself $50 in bonus funds when you sign up with the promo code SGPN. One more time, this is for brand new customers. It's a great offer where new customers can play just $5 and you'll get yourself $50 in bonus funds when you use the promo code SGPN. And finally, we're also brought to you by Novig, and Novig is America's #1 sports prediction market. Since Novig is an exchange, you know you're getting some of the best prices in the market. It's available at over 35 states, in over 35 states. Download the Novig app and get $50 when you spend just $5 with the promo code SGPN. That's $50 when you spend just $5 $5 with the promo code SGPN. Get in on the action with Novik.
What's up, Danger?
This is Saul Canelo Alvarez.
What's up, Danger?
This is Terrence Bud Crawford.
What's up, Danger?
They are the two best boxers in the world. Growing up, fighting became their life's work to turn dreams into destiny.
What's up, Danger?
One of the all-time greats. But Terrence Crawford is one of the best on planet Earth.
How many fighters have ever been called the best pound-for-pound fighter in the world? These are two of them, and they're going to fight.
When two of the greats both claim to be the greatest, there's only one way to find out.
What's up, Danger?
On September 13th, the moment arrives.
Can't stop me now!
Canelo versus Crawford, a true super fight that only comes along once in a lifetime.
What's up, Danger?
Yeah, the hyperbole for this fight is off the charts, and I'm going to address some of that in a minute. First of all, let me finish running through the markets. We've already told you that Canelo is available now at around about 4-7. It's 12-1 on the draw, and Bud Crawford is at 8-5 plus 160 at the book I'm using for these odds. Canelo via a decision is the favourite price in the market. Canelo points or decisions at 13-10. To knock out Bud Crawford via TKO KOs at 7-2. The draw, which I didn't talk about, which could seriously be in play here, is at 14-1. Bud Crawford is at 5-2 plus 250 to win via a decision, and he's at 9-1 to get the TKO KO on Canelo. The over-under market for this fight, well, it's very much expected to go the distance. It's at 1-3 minus 300 for yes, and it's at 5-2 plus 250 for no. And with the distance being so juiced, it isn't worth me really running through the group round markets. We usually do that. Canelo 1-6, Canelo 7-12, Crawford 1-6, Crawford 7-12. But it isn't worth me doing that because this fight is very, very much expected to go to the judges' scorecard. So I'm not going to waste time just running through markets. You can look all that up yourself. I'm going to use the rest of my time to analyze this fight. And when we're talking about hyperbole, we're talking about this being the two best fighters in the world, which was said there in that video. These are the best two pound-for-pound fighters in the world, and they come together. That cannot be claimed by Canelo Alvarez because there's a fighter walking around called Bivol who absolutely schooled Canelo Alvarez. And since he did that, Canelo Alvarez, whether it be a confidence crisis or whether it be just a case of not taking any risks and just collecting as much money as possible and salvaging his reputation at the same time, has cherry-picked the easiest possible fights imaginable, where there has literally been almost zero risk that Canelo would lose these fights. They have been tomato cans. They have been warm bodies, and Canelo has been guilty of this to some extent throughout his entire career, cherry-picking fights and making people adhere to his clauses because he has been the A side and he has milked that benefit throughout his career. And for me, not at any point in his career, even when he beat Triple G, because those victories were very, very disputed. Triple G definitely beat Canelo in the first fight and maybe even won the second one. Canelo, for me, has never, ever in his career been the pound-for-pound number one. Bud Crawford has, and you would argue that he still is now and has been since he beat Errol Spence. You can't build up a fight and say it's for the pound-for-pound king, and just because one guy absolutely demolishes the other, you then step away from that narrative. They also tried to sell the Bivol Beterbiev as the pound-for-pound clash, and they exchange wins, with Bivol winning the last one, and I'm sure Bivol Beterbiev 3 is going to be happening relatively soon, much sooner than Bivol versus Canelo 2, because Canelo will never ever step in the ring again to be embarrassed by Dimitri Bivol like he was last time. So as things stand, it's either Bivol or Crawford for me. If Crawford loses this fight, stepping up so much in weight, I don't think it damages him too much in a pound-for-pound conversation for me or anybody that knows boxing. But the casual fans, they will immediately crown Canelo Alvarez as the pound-for-pound king, which is completely fraudulent, which is why I desperately don't want it to happen. On top of Terence Crawford being my side here as far as a betting selection goes, I don't want Saul Canelo Alvarez to win because I believe his entire career has been fraudulent and padded. Is Canelo one of the all-time greats? Yes. Is he a huge box office draw? Yes. Is he an elite fighter? Yes. Did he beat Triple G 3 times? No. Did he lose to Alessandro Lara? Yes. Did he deserve to be given anything on the scorecards against Floyd Mayweather and for that fight to be a majority decision when Canelo Alvarez clearly lost 10 rounds of that fight? No. But Canelo has always benefited from favourable scoring, and that, and only that, will be the main concern going into tomorrow night, because I don't have any doubts about Bud Crawford being able to carry the weight. And I don't have any doubts about Bud Crawford being able to beat the current version of Canelo that we've seen. Canelo has recently gone away from the 1, 2, 3, 4 punch combinations, and it's been very much a case of 1-2 and showing an inability to get some very, very poor and lackluster opponents out of the ring, leading me to the conclusion that Canelo has far more miles on his actual body and boxing clock than Bud Crawford, who, despite being 2 years older, is definitely the fresher and more hungrier fighter coming into this one. Canelo hasn't been able to finish people. His last few fights have been a significant disappointment ever since he did lose to Bivol. And you're talking about hand-picked, cherry-picked opponents who are not in the same league as Terence Bud Crawford. 1-2 combinations aren't going to be enough to beat Terence Crawford tomorrow night because he will be the busier fighter and he is going to come to trade with you. I don't know if that's necessarily a wise thing to do when you're coming up and giving up as much weight as Crawford is, but this is how Terence Crawford fights. Terence Crawford chased this fight. He's the one that wanted it. He didn't want any rehydration clauses. He didn't want Canelo to meet him halfway. There's no catch weight. He wanted this fight because I believe he knows that he can win this fight. And I think what you'll see tomorrow night is Bud Crawford winning the fight. I think that's how it's going to be scored by people on Twitter. I think that's how it's going to be scored by people at ringside and the commentators watching it on TV. I think you'll clearly see Bud Crawford going out there as the busier fighter. Yes, Canelo's going to land some power punches. Yes, the crowd are going to be with Canelo, and the oohs and ahs are going to be more prominent when Canelo is on the attack. But is he really going to do enough to win? I don't think that's going to be the case. I think it's going to be very clear to anybody with a boxing eye that Bud Crawford will be winning this fight. The problem is with the judges, who have always been favourable towards Canelo. And I'm not so sure if this is factored into the pricing. It probably is. But let's just assume that it isn't, and let's assume that the odds are completely fair. If that were the case, then I have a very, very different opinion to the books, because I would have this as a genuine 50-50, with the only question being, can Bud Crawford carry the weight? And if he can, Canelo has to stop him. For me, it's very simple. It's as simple as that. In a fair fight, it comes down to, can Canelo Alvarez use the weight to stop Bud Crawford? If it goes a full 36 minutes, the more active fighter, which will be Bud, ends up getting his hand raised, and surely the judges' scorecards will reflect that. Well, that would be the case if it wasn't Canelo Alvarez, or, in Canelo's defense, any fighter who's definitively the A side and is the one selling the tickets, and it's more important to the promoter that he wins. And obviously, in this case, that is the same, because Turki Al-Sheikh has done the big 6-fight deal with Canelo. And it's important for Canelo to be marketable throughout this period. But it's not as important to Turki as it is to other promoters, because he has endless supplies of money. And what's more important to the Saudis, more so than anybody promoting this fight from the US or an Eddie Hearn or whoever, is the dignity and the integrity of the Saudis being involved. What they're basically trying to do is show you that they belong in boxing. They don't want people to be scrutinizing their involvement. They don't want to be criticized for taking fights to Saudi Arabia and basically running boxing right now. And the way that you will get surefire criticism is to be overseeing a fight where Canelo Alvarez clearly loses and he still gets his hand raised and people are annoyed and frustrated with boxing again, and they say it's the same old shit, it's the same old shit. Canelo Alvarez and a lot of his fights are the epitome of everything that's wrong with boxing and the epitome of what Turki Al-Sheikh wants to eliminate. For a long time, you had fighters avoiding other fighters because they were protecting their records, and Turki Al-Sheikh came along with a huge bag of money, and suddenly we're getting all the top fights being made. So that has been a positive. Will the scoring be another positive going into this fight and after this fight as well? Well, so far, so good. And the example that I want to use is the one that I also highlighted over on VSiN. Terence Crawford and Canelo Alvarez could easily go on and have a second fight after this one. I'm pretty sure that would be a given if this ends up going down to the scorecards. The same was the case for Tyson Fury and Alexander Usyk. We already knew, whatever the outcome was, that the second fight was a 100% guarantee. The rematch was a guarantee no matter what happened in fight one. But how do you make even more money than that? How do you create even more intrigue? Well, you make it 1-on-1 and you set up a trilogy. Now, any boxing fan knows there isn't a litany of trilogies that have happened in boxing, but when they do happen, it is absolutely massive business. Nothing intrigues you more than a trilogy when it's tied up at 1-1. And that was the situation that Usyk and Fury could have easily found themselves in, because had Tyson Fury had his hand raised, nobody would have batted an eyelid because the fight was that close. I actually scored it as a draw. Some people scored it for Fury. I know Tyson Fury certainly scored it for Tyson Fury. But at the end of the day, the judges scored it for Alexander Usyk. And therefore, there was no trilogy, there was no big money fight, there was no third fight that would have been bigger than the first two fights. That didn't happen because the judges decided to score exactly what they felt like they'd seen. They were told to honestly score the fight. It was in line also with the AI scoring, which also gave the fight to Alexander Usyk. And Alexander Usyk got his hand raised, and there was no trilogy. There was no third fight that would have drawn more money than the first two. And that didn't end up happening. The Saudis decided to sacrifice the money in order to maintain their integrity. And we ended up seeing Alexander Usyk winning 2-0. And I don't think we'll ever see the third fight. And for me, whilst I would have liked to have seen the trilogy, that is a very, very positive income for the future of boxing, because what it tells me is that we shouldn't see Canelo Alvarez favoured, even though we will have a large number of Mexicans in the crowd tomorrow, and maybe they could influence the judges with their cheering and their oohing and ahhing. But I'm confident more so than ever that the judges will score it more fairly with the Saudis being involved rather than having Vegas judges, and rather than it being promoted by the likes of a Don King, Eddie Hearn, Frank Warren or whoever else. This is going to be under Turki Al-Sheikh, TKO, Dana White, and whilst it is probably more beneficial that Canelo Alvarez wins, I think we're seeing a rematch anyway. And whilst I still believe that the close rounds will go towards Canelo because of the oohs and ahs, and that Bud Crawford will need to win his rounds clearly, and he will need to probably win around about 8 of them, I can still see that happening because I just don't see Canelo being busy enough. As I said, I've seen a fighter who now struggles to get people out of there, far more inferior fighters than Bud Crawford. The 1, 2, 3, 4 punch combinations that he had when he was younger are no longer there. And whilst he is the younger fighter, he certainly is the older fighter when it comes to ring miles, and Bud Crawford for me is definitely the hungrier. And whilst there is a saying in boxing that a good big man always beats a good little man, there have been many, many examples of fighters coming up, including Canelo himself, coming up and taking titles. You can look at Manny Pacquiao, you can look at Alexander Usyk. When fighters are good enough and they feel that they're good enough to come up, they have often been very, very successful moving up and being able to take those titles. And I frankly don't believe that Canelo has ever been the pound for pound number one. I don't believe that Canelo is as good as many people think he is. Now, I don't want to piss on his legacy. As I said, I do think he's an elite fighter. I do think he's one of the greatest of all time. But top 5, top 10, even top 20, I don't have Canelo Alvarez there, and I never do. When you've relied on favourable scoring, when you relied on the fact that you have a huge fan base, which makes you the A card, which means promoters that you get involved with want you to win, and you've had that favourable scoring throughout your career, where you can look at your record and you can point to at least 3 fights that I know you lost and you had your hand raised in those fights, or one of them was a draw, that for me is a stain on your legacy. In addition to that, we all just saw Canelo Alvarez being beaten by Bivol, and since then, as I said, it's been a litany of hand-picked opponents. And that's what Bud Crawford is, and that's why Bud Crawford's had to sacrifice everything to get this fight made. But the fact that Crawford did that, and the fact that I've never seen Crawford even coming close to losing, and the fact that Terence Crawford has established himself as the pound-for-pound king, has passed every single test, has looked unbeatable up until this point, and is 37, but certainly doesn't have the background that Canelo has, doesn't have those miles on him. I believe that Terence Crawford will win this fight, and it's unfortunate in some ways that many people are in agreement with me, because by the time we've reached this edition of the Fight Show, we are now seeing a much reduced price because the sharps have come in. Maybe they listened to my bit on VEASAN, which was 2 months ago now, but those guys who listen to that will know. My guys over at Lock Betting will know. I've been high on Crawford since the beginning. Whilst Canelo is cherry-picking his fights, and whilst he probably felt like this was a very winnable fight for him, and he'll feel that tomorrow as well, going into the ring, I have no doubt in my mind that Canelo isn't that Canelo's confident, because Canelo doesn't take fights that he doesn't think he will win. He has made errors before. Bivol was an error, and Bivol beat him. Not only beat him, he beat him convincingly, and Canelo will never want a part of Bivol again. And I believe this is also going to prove to be a misjudgment. As I said, I look for Crawford to be winning those rounds. I look for him to be winning those rounds clearly. I look for Canelo to go for those 1-2 punches. He will land power punches in the exchanges. It will draw oohs and ahs, and he will get rounds that he probably shouldn't get. But he'll need to get 7 of those rounds in order to win this fight. And Bud Crawford will also need to get 7 of those rounds. But in order for him to win, those 7 rounds will need to be very, very clear. Even though I think these judges will be fair under Turki Al-Sheikh. But I think those 7 rounds or even 8 rounds will be clear enough for Bud Crawford to get his hand raised. Just want to say something before I close out about the draw. The draw is available at 14-1, and I certainly think it's a runner, with Canelo being the one who I think the judges will want to give the rounds to before the round starts. It's up to Bud Crawford to go out there and to clearly win the rounds, not for Canelo. So Canelo is going to get rounds that he didn't necessarily go out there and win. So if this is tied up at 6 rounds each, obviously the draw comes into play. And that is much more likely to happen when you have a fighter on one side of this fight who's going to benefit from, I wouldn't say favourable scoring, because I'm trying to make a point that I don't think that will happen. But you can't help but be influenced by the crowd. So the fact that this guy may get close rounds because of the crowd, or maybe because he's the A side, that means that the draw is certainly in play. And also a draw doesn't hurt your rematch prospects either. So I'm not going to bet the draw, but what I will tell you to bet is to take Terence Crawford to win this fight And rather than just taking him in the three-way market where the draw is an option, if the draw happens, your bet on Crawford or your bet on Canelo is a loser, take the bet in the draw no bet market instead. In that situation, the draw voids your bet entirely. It is a little bit of a price reduction, so the plus 170 available isn't available in the draw no bet market. Instead, you'll have to take a plus 160, but I'm happy to do that to just completely remove the draw entirely. If you have a bad book that only have the three-way market and don't carry draw no bet, instead, just sprinkle on the draw as a hedge instead. Ultimately, I can only see Bud really winning this via decision. So it may be worth just taking the decision instead, which bumps you up to 5-2 plus 250. But stranger things have happened than Bud Crawford finding a way to stop Canelo Alvarez because his sheer volume just gets him out of there at some point in the fight. So I'm going to stick with Bud Crawford to win. I'm going to take Bud Crawford in the draw no bet market. I'm going to take that at the price of 8-5 plus 160 here for this one. That's it for me and this edition of The Fight Show. I'll be back with WWE WrestlePalooza next weekend on the next edition of The Fight Show as we see John Cena and Brock Lesnar stepping into the ring. There's also a very intriguing mixed tag match as CM Punk's wife returns to the ring to team up with him, and they'll be taking on Seth Rollins and Becky Lynch. This has been one of the best built-up storylines in WWE for a long time, so there's a lot of interest in this match. There's a lot of interest in this pay-per-view, and I'll be breaking it down for you next weekend. Also, don't forget to check out all of the additional shows. We've got your usual shows on the Soccer Gambler podcast, the EPL shows, Messi Italia, and Bet FC covering the Manchester Derby. But on Sunday and Monday, I'll be dropping Champions League shows because the Champions League returns next week, and there'll be an individual show for the futures, and there'll be an individual show for match day one as well. Good luck with all your bets as always, guys, and thanks for listening.